When we look back in the midst of history in the past, knowing what has existed and what was, we're so thankful that the Lord has truly been on our side. And what they said would never be has been, and what is in spite of what was, because the Lord is on our side. God is omnipotent. God is omnipresent. God is omniscient. God knows everything. God has the power to control and take care of everything. And God is everything. But nevertheless, God abides by rules that man will not live by. God abides by rules that man can't even understand. And when God established what he established, he gave it to us in the beginning in Genesis itself. And our own beloved brother Adam betrayed him and lost it for all of us. And God, being who God was, because he gave him free will, did not take it out on him, but allowed what was to be continued, because in that sixth day that he had made man, he made also Eve. And when he made Eve, he had made a passageway for us to be redeemed and saved through the daughters of Eve. For Eve is the mother of all, and we are all from the mothers that have made that understanding made known, because some of us have come all the way by the blessings and the prayers of our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, and our great-great-grandmothers. How great thou art, for he came down 40 and 2 generations that we might receive all of what he has established, maintained, and have done and accomplished, that we might have it all. If only we would believe it, we could receive it. We could believe it, we would receive it. And he who was with him even in the beginning, who is himself, God himself, which is called the Son. Clearly we miss it when we don't fully understand what is in St. John. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And everything that was made by him, and nothing that was made that was not made was made by him. And he is the light of men. And somehow feminists have gotten it twisted in misconception and believe that God had left them out, for they were always included. But another movement will always move something to some place it need not go. And therefore we have again conflict of interest, but Eve is the mother of all. And without Eve, nothing else could have possibly have been, because it was established in the beginning that she and her seed would be the evidence by which God would destroy the devil, because he would come into this world, and yet leaving glory and leaving everything, would become as lowly as he could, and not even a place for him to lay his head in a manger. And yet he came into this world that he might save us all from this world. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and when we were enemies of God, God loved us, compelled us, moved us, and touched us in such a way that we did not even know that God was present. When God attempted to save the mankind in the very beginning, when all that was in the heart of man was evil, that God said man that he fondly loved and compassion with, which was Noah. And Noah was really the direct descendant of Seth, and Seth, let us go right back to Adam so we don't get it twisted. And in this transition, Noah building the ark and his family, people laughed and made jokes because they could not conceive or believe, because there was not a cloud in the sky, there was no water anywhere, and they denied it and continued to do what they do, as they always do, what they wanted to. But God did not interfere, because nevertheless, he had said, the day you eat of this fruit, you would surely die. Death reigned from Adam to Moses. And yet, nevertheless, God didn't take any action, because there was no law in place except that which had already been broken. And death was doing its thing slowly but surely. For man was living not longer but less. And even in the midst, when God took charge in his anger, he said, build me an ark. And Noah, being obedient, built the ark. Noah, being obedient, built the ark. And in building the ark, only 8 souls were saved. Only 8 souls, and the rest of the world drowned. So if you ain't from Ham, Shem, or Japheth, I want to know where you're coming from. And then we perceived that it landed on Mount Ararat, and the raven was sent forth first, but it did not return. But yet the dove on numerous occasions, and then it did return with an olive leaf in its beak. And it was the beginning of the world all over again, and thus we have Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And they were to fruit forth and multiply and refill and replenish the earth. And they did so. But God had already prepared a way for us, because if we skip ahead to Moses, that after they hung out too long, following Isaac and other transitions, the final answer was Joseph, who stayed in Egypt too long. And because Joseph, who stayed in Egypt too long, they ended up being enslaved by a Pharaoh that didn't know their name, didn't remember their God, and didn't remember who he was or what he would do to him. And after 10 plagues on this man brought to him by Moses himself, who was raised in the house of Pharaoh, he finally let the people go. Well, we've seen slavery, we've read about slavery, and some of us have lived long enough to even remember slavery. Whites only, blacks can't come in here, blacks can't come in there. And yet this was a means of the devil still manipulating people, because it was never about color. It was always about the mad dash for the catfish. And it's still going on today. And yet when Moses brought them out, they still murmured and they talked like they just didn't have no sense, like they just didn't know what was going on. And when he brought them to the Red Sea, they were still murmuring and saying how lousy a general God must be. And yet when he parted the Red Sea and they came out on the other side and he drowned all of Pharaoh's army, they still murmured and doubted, but God was still on their side. Where would we be if God was not on our side? And when they went through the wilderness and come out on the other side, now in the wilderness they still murmured and talked like fools, saying that he gave them nothing to eat. He gave them what the angels ate, manna from heaven, and they did eat. And then they wanted water, and he had the Moses strike the rock, and they did drink. And then they murmured that they didn't have no meat, and he gave them more quail than they knew what to do with. And then they decided they even wanted to turn on Moses, and Moses said that they want to speak to you, and I told them they couldn't. And God said, no, you hold your reign, I'll let them speak with me. And he brought them to Mount Sinai, and he told them how to prepare themselves that they might come up and speak with God. But when God did speak with them, they spoke with such fervor and with such power that they could not stand it and said, let God speak.